All right. Welcome, everyone, to From the Swamp to the States. This is ATR's Americans for Tax Reform's state policy-oriented podcast, and we've evolved into doing live streams. We did one last month in December, doing one this month in January, so we can talk to you all on Facebook and Twitter, and then we release this feed, audio feed to our iTunes podcast, From the Swamp to the States. So definitely check it out there if you want to watch the recording later. And very, very, very excited. We have a serious topic today to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about New York and New Jersey, the New York City metro area, and what's going on there and what the prospects may be for a comeback. And we have a great guest, Dipal Patel, who is the owner of Hexa Builders and has a very interesting background, grew up in the area, very well situated to tell us what it's like trying to create jobs and run a business, and what I think we can all acknowledge is a difficult environment, and perhaps now more difficult than ever. So thanks very much for being with us, Dipal.
Doug, thanks for having me, and appreciate the opportunity to share my story with everyone.
Yeah, so let's start there, so folks learn a little bit more about your background and why we're really excited to have you join us today. You grew up in New Jersey. What was it like growing up in New Jersey, and how did you get into the healthcare industry, which you worked in, and then to real estate?
Yeah, born and raised in Jersey. I went to Rutgers University. I went then Harvard Business School after that, but spent the vast majority of my time in Jersey. My parents came here in the 70s, wanted to live the American dream. And put us through some great schooling here in our wonderful state. And as you mentioned, I had the opportunity to work with some fantastic entrepreneurs who I helped manage a number of businesses in New York City, and ultimately became an entrepreneur myself, established a business in New Jersey, and now have a number of sites and opportunities and businesses that we pursue in this state. So, born, raised, and bred here in this great state, and lots of stories to share as it relates to that.
Well, very good, and you've stayed, which has been an accountlement as of late, as we've all been.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into that, but
the numbers of people leaving. But let's talk about in terms of how do you feel about things now in the New York City, New Jersey area, particularly as a business owner, compared to, a few years ago, maybe even just 5 years ago, but 5 to 10 years ago, we've seen, from an ATR perspective, we talk a lot about taxes and regulations. We've seen those go up. There's certainly some quality of life issues in the area, but what's the perspective on the ground as somebody who's running a business there and raising a family there?
Yeah. I think that my perspective with regards to being in Jersey really is one of love the state. I love being here. I have a 14-year-old son, a 10-year-old daughter. I'm continue to raise them in the state, and I have seen this state go from the days where things what mattered as far as me as a citizen growing up and going to schooling here. Your perspective changes when you become a business owner, as I have in the past 10 years, and you see the way that the implications of taxes in the state. It's a different view. It's a different vantage point that I have these days than I did growing up, and specifically. I know that tax issues in Jersey have been a perennial issue for as long as anyone can remember. But I often tell people that, I live in the Princeton area, and one of our most famous residents in Princeton, Albert Einstein, famously said that the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. And I kind of feel that that's what's happening in Jersey these days. We expect to do the same thing over and over again as it relates to our economic viability and people's the ability to stay in the state. And we expect a different result. And that's something that's unfortunate. And as a business owner, all I can hope is that the value proposition to be in this state, to continue to doing business in this state, remains. And I hope that's the case for the 9 million residents of New Jersey. It's just becoming harder and harder for that value proposition to be there.
I mean, you say it's getting harder and harder. We can continually point to how New Jersey and New York both have extremely high taxes, whether it's property taxes, the business tax climate. We can look at a number and say, all right, Tax Foundation says New Jersey has the worst business tax climate in the US. What is that like for you? How does that change decision making? How does it impact hiring or new projects? What is the on the ground cost of that? And then I guess the follow-up would be, when you see it's the worst, why stay there? You could literally go any place if it's the worst business tax climate, it would be better.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Doug. It people often refer to it as the cost of doing business, and the cost of being here is you either deal with it or go somewhere else, right? And that's been famously said publicly these past few years. But it is becoming, as I mentioned, the value proposition to be in this awesome location, geographically speaking, between two major metropolitan areas, the I-95 corridor, so many great things, in the state. But when, as the world changes, with the opportunity to be doing business remotely and not having to necessarily be in one specific location, people are making the choice to relocate. And as a business owner, the tax situation is, to me, taxes is a manifestation of some fundamental things that need to change, here. And the result of those inefficiencies is that keep taxing people, right? So, as a business owner, and I think that any business owner in New Jersey, if you speak to them, they'll tell you that the regulatory environment here is just, you can't do anything about it. You got to live with it. You got to deal with it. You open up a business, you start, whether it's an LLC or whatever it is you start, and then, you go through the process of actually running your business. Along the way, there are taxes and fees and things that, people don't talk about often, but it is the way that business is done here. And it's hard. And I can't imagine, and I know I can imagine, because I was a small business owner, very small business owner when I started out. It's just difficult for anyone to think, well, why should I stay here and go through all these regulatory hurdles? People are not necessarily aligned with helping me grow my business. In fact, there's a bit of like, they're going to prohibit you from doing what you want to do, your business. And there's a fee associated with that, usually, to prohibit you to do business. And that's got to change, and unless, and I'm a bit jaded these days. I don't know if politicians are going to be able to figure it out or not, but I do feel that there should be a groundswell here in Jersey with people coming together and saying that we're just not going to be okay with this, and this is very nonpartisan for me personally, but we really need to be going out and talking to the people who make these decisions and say, I'm fed up. We can't do this. And the people who don't will leave and go somewhere else.
And the people who currently, although one of them is had a big upset with the Senate president getting knocked out, but during the campaign, because New Jersey just had an election last year, Governor Murphy, who had raised taxes pretty much every budget he proposed, shifted his tone to saying we're saying we're done raising taxes. Now he's against raising taxes. This former Senate president had talked a lot about reforming the pension system, which is a drag on government finances. And, there's been some lip service paid, and we're talking about Democrats here, to, like you said, changing course, changing tone on tax and regulatory policy, but it doesn't seem like any results have actually manifested from that talk. So how does that come across to you when you sort of hear the talk? Is it encouraging, or is at this point just, if you don't show me any results, we're just going to assume the status quo will continue?
Yeah, to be honest with you, that's where I am, and I think that a lot of people in Jersey, when you talk to them, it's the same feeling. Like I said, I'm a bit jaded by the whole political process here, and people will come in and say, "This is what we're going to do, pension reform." I mean, how many years, how many times has that word been mentioned in the past 20, 30, 40 years in the state? And there's very little that anyone does with it. There are a lot of forces at play that normal business owner just, you can't, the lobbies here, the way the business is done in the state, it's just difficult to understand for the normal everyday Jersey guy or girl, and you become, like I said, jaded by the process. And then every election year, someone comes and says something that, we're going to fix the system, we're going to have pension reform. I know now that I understand that there's a discussion with regards to the school funding formula, so they're looking at it. But until something is done, it's just going to be this problem that it comes out of the pocketbook of every New Jersey resident, and then nothing gets done. I think that we really need some courageous people to step up and say that, we are not okay with the status quo. And that's difficult to do in this state. If the political process here, it's, the machinery runs a lot of things, and people get, in Jersey, people are smart. We get that. We get that the machinery runs how things are done, but if it doesn't impact people's pocketbooks at the end of the day, what are you going to do? And that's where most people leave it at that. You can't do anything about it. You just, stick with it or leave. And that's an unfortunate way of looking at things, here in the state.
We see a lot of people leaving. I mean, you're there and you're hanging in there. Does that not make things more urgent for the folks running the show in Trenton, that the exodus numbers are overwhelming? I know the pandemic has some role in this, but I think we've all seen the numbers at this point. New Jersey lost population last year. It's not one of the biggest losers. I mean, New York, California, Illinois are states that lost in a year more than 1% of the state population, which is crazy. While you have other states like Florida, Arizona, Idaho gaining more than 1% of their state's population. These are, alarming numbers. 1% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking about a year and an entire population, that's a huge number.
Huge.
Why aren't the alarm bells going off then? I mean, they're losing folks like you who are giving up before you give up. Eventually, you'll run out of patience, or at least they're losing projects, right? You can't invest in the state more.
Yeah.
Why aren't the alarms going off?
I think that some of the alarms went off last November. I do think that I mentioned a bit of a groundswell that's needed here in the state, and I think that we saw a little bit of that. And the politicians responded, right? And we heard them say publicly that I hear you. I hear that taxes are a problem. Property taxes are a problem. We need to do something about it. But again, that's just talk. I think that with regards to why people or the alarm bells are not going off, because there's the politicians run 4-year cycles, right? And in 4 years, they need to do what they need to do to stay in power. And people make these, and I'm sure the politicians make their choices. This is what I can do. This is what I'm willing to do, and then that's it. It's the New Jersey resident that is, at the end of the day, has the disadvantage of just sitting there watching these politicians come and go, and saying giving you whatever is politically expedient to that moment in time, and then moving on. And that's why I say that unless there's a groundswell with not just politicians, but I think community leaders and business leaders, to step up and say that we need fundamental change in Jersey. We have 564 municipalities in this state. We have, and everyone will tell you there is an extreme amount of inefficiency when you're talking about all the different districts, all the different the things that have to happen in all these municipalities, and all the school systems, maintaining all of that, the cost of that. And when you look at municipal budgets, you just see all of this money go into things that could be more efficient. And a lot of the times the towns don't even have the ability to make them efficient because the state and the counties, the way that they're set up, the legacy issues that we deal with regards to how we're set up, it's difficult. We get it. But that's when you need a strong, courageous politician to say, well, we're not going to continue doing this. And sometimes, there have been some strong people who decided to run, and then the machinery just does what it does, and does what's politically expedient at that moment in time. So I hope that last November was a start of something. I hope that people speak up. I hope that, again, from a very nonpartisan perspective, whether you're D or R, people, the average New Jersey resident gets up and says, I'm fed up with this, I'm done. And so let's change.
Yeah, and now for a variety of reasons, partially the federal government sending a lot of money to states, the state finances look good in a way now that may not last, and how they use that money could cause additional strain in the future if they create new costs that they have to keep filling going into the future. Then that could make this worse, or they could use it on to enable something like pension reform that could be helpful to keeping costs lower into the future. So that will be a very.
But that, to me, that was a bit artificial, right? What happened with during the pandemic when that money came in?
Yeah.
Before that, for every dollar we sent to DC, we got 75 cents back, right? We were on the lower end of that stick. Jersey, has always historically been that way. But you have an artificial, influx of cash, and then you try and solve that by reducing. Some debt, that doesn't fundamentally change, our problems here. Our challenges are fundamental. They're systemic, and someone has to have the courage to systemically change them. And it's just not in the appetite of politicians these days. And all I can do is hope. And like I said to you before, people stay because the value proposition is there for them to be here. But it's getting harder and harder. And people will at some point say, even me or many of my friends will say, it's just as good being in Florida or Texas or North Carolina, all three places. I've actually pursued businesses, and I own property in South Florida currently. So I see the dichotomy. I see the difference. And until someone is courageous enough, like I said, to say that we need to make the changes here, people will just make the choices that they need to survive.
Well, we'll see what happens on that front. We encourage New York and New Jersey legislators to try to look forward to see that as population declining, you're degrading your tax base. At some point, you're going to have a very tough decision, and you won't be able to raise taxes on these people anymore. To try to fill a hole as your tax base is shrinking and can't cough up more money. But
I think it's, as a business owner, and I hear many business owners say this, we are responsible for keeping our businesses afloat by making money as far as revenue is concerned, and then making sure that we're responsible with our expenses so that we don't go bankrupt at the end of the day, right? And that's every business owner's fundamental charge, is to, in a capitalistic environment, to do business, provide a service or product to a consumer, and make money doing it. It's difficult when a government or an estate doesn't have to do that, and it can spend more than it brings in, and hands it off to the next person. And that person hands it off to the next person. And as a business owner, business owners will say, well, why don't they have to do what we have to struggle with every single day? And that's unfortunate. And you sometimes you get some business owners who come in to be politicians. Some work out great because they have that perspective. They say, well, I needed to do this as a business owner, and why shouldn't the state have to look at it in the same way and allow its its customers, the citizens of the state of New Jersey, to keep more money in their pocket for them and their families to be able to do what they need to do. But unfortunately, it's the charge of governments and government agencies doesn't seem to be aligned with what business owners have to do every single day.
Well, and you said made an interesting statement about businesses have to provide a service that customers are requesting. That gets into, I think, one of the biggest frustrations for people in the area, particularly New York City area, is you're paying, the New York City budget's larger than the state of Florida. The New York City budget, the state budget proposals more than twice the state budget of Florida, and the basic government services are breaking down. We're paying all this money, something like the Metropolitan Transit Authority, which runs the subway system and commuter rail. They have a taxing ability. There are taxes that go directly to them on top of debt they can carry, on top of getting money from the state, and yet the trains don't run on time.
Yep.
Less service. It's more dangerous. That's become a big issue. All the crime numbers they're up. Violent crime is up, and particularly for people who might want to commute back into a city at some point, they're up in the transit system. So, how frustrating is that? And then two, what's the impact, for somebody trying to operate a business in the area and keep things going if, your employees and partners are, not able to move around and you make use of the city and sort of transit and those regions.
Our infrastructure here in the Northeast. If you've flown into, I'm sure you have, into one of our airports, we don't have the best airports. We don't have, our flights are never on time. People dread, flying into Newark for how long it's going to take for them to get there, to get to their final destination. New Jersey Transit is just, chronically has issues all the time. I took the train into New York City for many, many years. I've taken the subway for many, many years. There's just things that, look, when you're here, when you're here for a long time, you just get used to, and you chalk it up to it's just the way that it is. But when services, another famous one here in Jersey is our motor vehicle, the DMV here. They're just days and days and days to get your license or applications or whatever approved. And I talked about the value proposition. When you get taxed more and more, you would expect, right? If you paid a premium to go to a really fancy restaurant and they're going to charge you, $100 for this dish, you expect for that dish to be like exceptional, right? And so fine, tax us. Okay. Let's say that we all say that tax us, but at least give us the services that tax should be providing. And we just, that continues to deteriorate. So when there's that gap that forms when there's more and more taxes, but the services aren't there or getting any better, you start to question, and that's what people are doing now, I think, more and more so. Where's all this going? Why can't we get it better? And you mentioned crime, and that's been a big problem. And as you know, in New York today, I'm sure in the news, there's a funeral for a police officer who was just horrifically shot and killed. The two police officers, and crime is just gone just ridiculous. And these notions of defunding the police and not having the resources allocated to protect and keep our community safe, it just doesn't make sense. And a business owner, and can you imagine right now walking around in New York, people are afraid. If you own a restaurant at a corner, people don't want to come out after a certain time because they're afraid for their lives. As a government agency, as a government, how do you allow that to continue to happen? And business owners will, at the end of the day, say that this is ridiculous. First, you want to defund the police and let crime go crazy, and then I have to suffer because my customers don't want to come out and have dinner or drinks. It's a difficult environment to operate in, and all we can hope that we have sensible people, making these decisions that allow us to continue to run our businesses.
Well, the sensible people making decisions is part of the issue. They're not there. Well, let's fit in one more question before we hit 1:30. We mentioned Florida a bit. There's a dichotomy there. Talk a little bit about somebody who has some operations in Florida, the difference between operating in a state like that and New York, New Jersey.
Yeah. So like I said to you before, when you are trying to run a business, and you go through the regulatory environment. Now, let me just say that I'm actually a fan of regulation, reasonable regulation. I think that is necessary. I think that, a government should be charged with making sure that people are doing the right thing and that there are rules to follow. But when a government wants to make doing business harder for you, seemingly on purpose, which is what with the experience that you have in New Jersey, any agency that you go to, it's not a, hey, Dipal, let me help you get to this point. Now, we have some rules that you have to follow, which, this is the reason why these rules need to be followed. But I want to be a resource for you to help you run your business. You don't get that feeling in New Jersey. You do in Florida. And we have had a number of reasons to be engaging with the local government there, even the city, Miami-Dade County there, and always been an exceptional experience. People get back to you. They're not trying to make it difficult for you. They explain to you why these are the rules. This is the case, and they do that in a low tax environment. Right, with no income tax, which means to me fundamentally that there's something better happening there than perhaps going on here in Jersey. So, like you mentioned before, if we can't get past business owners having agencies and all, the layers of bureaucracy built here, fine, they're there. Okay, we're not going to get rid of them overnight, but if we can't get them to be helpful to the business owner or even the residents, I don't know what to say. That's where people get jaded, and then they stop, and then they move. So, that's. I mentioned I actually pursued some business opportunities in North Carolina in the Raleigh area, and I can't tell you how enthusiastic they were to help me. And they Paul, come down. Let's do something here. I know they're a growing metropolitan area, but it's just a different way of approaching government in these locations than often you feel here in Jersey.
Okay, well, hopefully everybody can see us. I've had the video go in and out, but I think the audio has remained clear. But let's close. The area still has some advantages. There was some reason that New York City became a big thing. Reasons for optimism for the future for the New York City metro area.
I mean, geographically, I've been around the world. Geographically, there's no better place to be. Like I said to you, New York City is to me, it's still the greatest city in the world, with the best restaurants, the best. I'm a big Giants fan, the best team. We're not doing so well these days, but still, the best sports teams. We have, the Jersey Shore in the summertime is a great place to be. Just geographically, we have so many advantages. Despite our infrastructure problems, you can hop on a plane from Newark and get to anywhere in the world, one stop. There's so many reasons to be here. We have the best universities, the best schools in the entire country, right at our doorsteps, right here. As a business owner, a tremendous labor pool. very smart, qualified, skilled people here. We have fundamentally so many great ingredients at our disposal here. It's just a matter of sensible people putting it together and allowing it to flourish. And it seems to me that that's again, from a nonpartisan perspective, that has not been, someone hasn't been able to figure out that formula. I don't profess to have the answers to that, but if you're going to run for office, put together a plan and put aside all the other motives, and let's just get the state back to where it needs to be.
Well, we have some ideas on that, so we'll talk to the state legislators in Trenton and give them ideas. So maybe stop working against taxpayers and get serious about limiting their burdens so that they can grow the state. It's a simple starting point: is trust the people to grow the state and not the state government in Trenton, because they haven't been getting it done. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Dipal. And anything else you want to share before we let you go?
No, I just, let me make a pitch for people to move back to New Jersey. How about that? We have a great state. I know that we have some challenges, but this is a great state, and all I can hope is that aspire that we'll do better and we'll get better.
There are a few more taxpayer protection pledge signers in the legislature. Maybe we'll share that number with people. They can gather for themselves whether it's time to go back. But
yeah,
have you. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you, Doug.
Talk to you again in the future. And Dipal, thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Be well. Be safe.
For tuning in, and we'll see you on the podcast stream where we'll share this afterwards. So thanks, everybody. And you can find us at atr.org, Americans for Tax Reform, atr.org. Thanks.